Tapos of Jackro is more than just a point of sale. They've been a leading innovator in cinema software for 30 years and counting. In that time, they've learned that a good supplier needs to be a good partner. That's why their long-standing Tapos customer promise is to share regular upgrades with all their partners, always at no additional cost. Discover why hundreds of cinemas, circuits, and family entertainment centers around the world trust Tapos for seamless ticketing, sophisticated food and beverage features, inbuilt customer relationship management, and much more. During CinemaCon 2026, come see the Tapos team at booth 821 in the Julius Ballroom, or book a demo at any time via the link at taposapp.com.
I just believe fundamentally that we are more effective when we talk with the singular voice. We are different, but we're united behind our support for the theatrical experience. And so one of the things that I think that we're not just trying to do at CinemaCon, although that's going to be a part of it, but to do it 52 weeks out of the year is convey support and talk about all of the different aspects of our industry.
This is the Box Office Podcast. I'm Daniel Loria, the editorial director of Box Office Pro, the pulse of theatrical exhibition, welcoming you to our special CinemaCon 2026 series. We've got our kickoff episode today, and then starting on Monday, April 13th through Friday of that week, we're going to have special daily episodes coming to you that are produced from Las Vegas, Nevada, as Rebecca and I cover everything happening in the world's biggest convention for the movie theater industry. In today's episode, we want to thank our sponsors, Tapos, Irwin Seating, and Cube. You will also be hearing from a couple of folks from Cube in this week's special sponsor segment of our conversation. We've got Rajesh Ramachandran and Kristen Klipinski from Cube. That is coming up later on in today's episode. And then in the second half, in our feature interview segment today, we've got Michael O'Leary, President and CEO of Cinema United, talking to us about everything coming up from this event, all the priorities that Cinema United is looking at as they look forward to an special and very important bounce back year for theatrical exhibition. I am joined today by my colleague and co-host Rebecca Pauley for this news segment, and a special guest here joining us from the Wrap, the box office and labor reporter, Jeremy Fuster. Guys, welcome to this special kickoff section. A lot to talk about as we look at everything that we anticipate is going to be a talking point at CinemaCon this coming week. Let's go over this week's news before we delve into everything CinemaCon, because we are coming off the best Q1 in the post-pandemic era, with the North American cinema industry bringing in $1.77 billion at the box office. That is considerably above the $1.65 billion that we forecasted at the beginning of the year, and a 25% year-over-year improvement in Q1 numbers. Now, we expect that momentum to carry into Q2 with a great performance of the Super Mario Galaxy movie, which opened to $190 million on a 5-day basis here in North America. On a 3-day basis, that number came into $130 million. That is below the $146 million 3-day haul from the first Super Mario title in this franchise. I believe the 5-day on that one back in 2023 was around 205 million. So a lower opening weekend for this Mario movie, guys. But if you look at Illumination titles, as we noticed over the weekend, a lot of those Illumination sequels usually come under the predecessor on opening weekend basis. We were expecting for something potentially a little bit closer to where Minecraft opened last year at around the same dates. All in all, I don't think anyone is going to be complaining because, Rebecca, we also heard from major exhibitors that they hit their Easter weekend records thanks to that title.
If the admissions weren't quite up to the level that maybe they were for Minecraft or that first Mario Brothers movie, we know that the merchandise program for this film, the Super Mario Galaxy movie, did particularly well. In addition to, as you mentioned, at Marcus, Cinemark, and AMC. But yeah, a lot of those custom popcorn buckets, custom food and beverage items, really doing a lot of heavy lifting at these chains over the weekend.
It speaks to how theaters over the last few years have adapted to okay, fewer people are coming to theaters, but let's just jack up that per patron spending. Well, when we know that the people who are coming are going to splurge on the concessions, on the big screen, and on the merch. And what sells? Few things sell as much merch as Mario. If you've ever been to Universal Studios, Mario merch flies off of the shelves.
I mean, heck, I'm not a Mario person, but I see Yoshi popcorn bucket, and I'm like, I want to know what that looks like. Yeah, I mean,
There's
it's
a lot
definitely
of interest for all that. Yeah.
no. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, I've heard, people talk and speculate as to how long is this custom merchandise bubble, if it is a bubble, going to last. But we're definitely seeing that there's still a lot of potential, at least for select titles, for cinemas to really maximize their efforts on really pushing the items that they're going to be able to get the highest amount of return from.
Of course, we have AMC, Cinemark, and Marcus all reporting fantastic records in one category or another from Easter weekend. This also comes into play in how we talk about the industry, and it's something that Jeremy and I, working the same beat in different publications, talk about quite a bit. It's not just the studio perspective. When we talk about box office numbers, it's not just about, which star is doing well or what type of franchise is doing well or what studio is winning or losing. That's not the conversation we're having as a whole. We have to talk about it in terms of how is this helping the circuits. And in terms of the circuits, when you have a title like this perform at a decent level, maybe not an overperformance, but a performance that everyone, best of the year so far, you can close that gap thanks to merchandising sales, to concession sales, and that is crucial for this ecosystem to work. The question here doesn't begin and end on box office numbers alone. It's an entire ecosystem around it. And as we've seen from three major circuits, they did quite well. Now, it's not only the Super Mario Galaxy movie leading circuits to these benchmarks. We also had a fantastic hold from Project Hail Mary. But right now, guys, no complaints. A hot start to Q2, important benchmark in Q1. And that leads us into what is going to be a very busy CinemaCon 2026. So let's delve right into the topics we have here with the biggest questions facing exhibition at CinemaCon 2026. We have to start with the biggest topic of them all, the Paramount Warner Brothers merger. Now, I don't think there is going to be much conversation on this. Probably Cinema United is going to address it in the State of the Union at some point, I'm guessing. It's definitely a big part of my interview with Michael O'Leary in the second half of this episode. But other than that, to be frank, I don't think the Motion Picture Association is going to be referring to it at all. And I'm not sure how much of a role it's going to be playing in any official conversation. Jeremy, do you think otherwise? I mean, is it going to be a letdown if we just kind of ignore the elephant in the room here?
Well, I might be spoiling what Michael O'Leary is going to be saying in your interview, but when I talked with him last week, I asked him about the Monday showcase that they're going to be doing with Angel, Studio Canal, and now Sony Pictures Classics in lieu of Roque. And he said that it wasn't done in response to the Warner Mount situation, that it was more of like sending a message of theaters need to branch out. They need to expand their relationships with other distributors, and get more types of films in theaters. And I mean, that in itself is a good message to send. I think with Sony Pictures Classics and just having theaters just get bigger partnerships and just expanding the kinds of films they put out there. Not everything's going to be like Iron Lung. Certainly none of the Sundance acquisitions from Sony Pictures Classics is going to be like Iron Lung. But, if you stop putting out movies that aren't just family films and horror films, then you're going to just give up the audience completely. And some of these films aren't going to work. The only way out is through.
I feel like people will understand what that means when the conversation turns to we need more films, not fewer films. We need a wider variety of films. I mean, that's kind of where we are at the Warner Mount. I'm going to steal that. I like that. I mean, there's so much that is still in the air with it. Talking about any specifics, just it's not the right place. It's not the right time. But yeah, I think you're right. I think in more general terms, we're going to hear about it, and then obviously a lot of behind closed doors. You're going to be hearing a lot about it from other people attending CinemaCon.
I think so. And to be very fair, I think Michael O'Leary addresses it very directly in the interview you're going to be hearing shortly on this podcast. I believe it will probably come up in the state of the industry at some point. I don't think, as we noted, I don't think Paramount, Warner Brothers, or the Motion Picture Association is probably going to focus too much on it. But I would say I'm not convinced Paramount will stay quiet on this. I wouldn't be surprised if there was a big name from Skydance attending and speaking on Thursday, schedule permitting. I don't know. That's not me revealing anything. I don't know. But in terms of where Paramount is, they have a big task ahead of them, which is letting theaters know that they hear them. And in the same way that Cinema United is lobbying to the political groups, I think Paramount has some lobbying to do with exhibitors. And I wouldn't be surprised if there isn't an attempt to do that somewhere as part of that Paramount presentation on Thursday. That's more or less how I think this is going to be addressed. But like you guys said, no one's here to burn any bridges. That's not going to be part of the conversation driving CinemaCon 2026, I don't think.
I think they absolutely will do that because that's what Paramount's been trying to do to the press. Like Paramount invited reporters in December to the lot to talk with them, and they were just heavily lobbying for like they're going to be the ones that are going to be good to Warner. And this was back when they were fighting with Netflix over it all, and they were just saying we're going to do 30 films a year. We're going to do 30 films a year, and I fully expect Paramount to outright say like, we will not do fewer films in theaters, pinky swear promises. But from my talks with exhibitors, I think people are going to be very, very, very skeptical of it.
I don't think anyone buys it. I'll be upfront
about
it.
No,
I don't think there's anyone in this industry that buys that number. Not a single person. I would love to be corrected on this, by the way. I've never wanted to be more wrong in my life. But I don't see a scenario where in any universe Paramount puts out 30 movies a year. If they put out 20, I'd be like mildly surprised, really, because that really hasn't been the way they've been working over the last decade or so, guys, or the way this industry has been moving.
Yeah, I can see there being a lot of leaning into the new era of Paramount, the new era of, we've seen how the industry has evolved in a lot of different ways over the past couple of months. I mean, who would have thought that we'd be having the Windows conversation that we're having, or rather not having the Windows conversation that we're not having, because everybody's pretty happy with Windows right now.
And that's something that I address in my interview with Michael O'Leary in today's episode and with Sean Gamble on Monday's episode of this podcast. That 45-day window has been such a priority, but we're coming in after Universal said, hey, about face, okay, we'll go to that. We'll go to a 45-day minimum window. I think that is something that we can check off the list. But I'm not sure how much more evolution there's going to be in Windows. Jeremy, this is something that we've been covering together in our respective publications for 6 years now. Feels like on a weekly basis. From your perspective, do you think there's any more movement on the window conversation now that Universal has adopted 45 days? And by that, I'm going to say, do you think Netflix budges on their stance? Because that's really the only question left.
I don't think Netflix budges, only because they no longer have a reason to. If they hadn't lost Warner, yes, I think they would have seriously had done it. But at this point, with the number of films that they still plan on putting out in theaters, I don't think they see a reason to do it. It feels like to me, everybody else, the trend is going towards 45 days. And I think theaters were successful in changing the conversation around windowing. And it's saying that, okay, if we're not doing 90 days, we have to do 45 days because you're leaving money on the table for everybody involved with these experiments. And I do note that Universal said that's not the case for Focus because of the way they do national rollouts. And yes, I do believe them when they say that the Northman helped them break even on PVOD. And if Northman hadn't broken even, then I don't think they continue with Robert Eggers on Nosferatu. They wouldn't have had the confidence to go yes on Nosferatu, and that paid off for them.
Theatrically, by the way, that didn't need PVOD to help it in any way. That thing either made $100 million or nearly made $100 million theatrical domestically.
Yeah. And the only other Universal film that I remember did pretty well was The Wild Robot. And that was the other one that Universal kept pointing to me as like an example of their PVOD model working, because it was still holding well even after it came out on PVOD. They said it made a lot of money there, probably from families that couldn't afford going to the movies at that point. But yeah, in the long run, the 45-day window being if not a hard rule across all the studios, being one that all the studios are gravitating towards, that's only going to help in the longer run. We'll have to see how audiences respond to it, because I do think these last few years have led to a general sentiment of, oh, it'll be on streaming sooner or later, but maybe that will change over next several years.
I remember going back in 2020 and speaking to several outlets, and I was laughed at when I said, give it time, we're going to go back to longer exclusivity windows. I accepted it wasn't going to be 90 days, which I always, frankly, found too long. I'm not sure 45 days is the perfect answer, but it seems to be the middle ground for everyone. So let's go with that. But in 2020, when everybody was ditching exclusivity windows or had very small windows, anybody with a LinkedIn profile was out there saying, say goodbye to exclusivity. 6 years later, everyone is back to a 45-day window. Everyone, exception of Netflix, which never really had exclusivity to begin with, but everyone is back. And I will go one more. Not every, but most executives that were streaming first are no longer in this industry. And that's telling you what that rush to PVOD, what that rush to day and date streaming ended up being. It was a mirage. It was something to impress Wall Street. It really didn't help Peacock from losing. How much is Peacock losing? Like 500 million a quarter or something absurd like that. It didn't really save any of the streaming platforms. It didn't turn anyone into the next Netflix. When HBO did it for the fans, that company sold twice. Warner Brothers sold to Discovery first and now is selling to Paramount. So there goes that genius strategy. I like the fact that we're walking into a CinemaCon where the Windows conversation is no longer up in the air. And I agree with you guys. I think O'Leary and Cinema United and his members, everyone was able to come in with a unified message, and they can walk into CinemaCon 2026 saying, this is a win. Now let's move forward. Let's move to other things that can make sense in this industry. Now, we spoke a little bit about how Netflix plays part of this conversation at all. Now that Netflix is no longer in the running for Warner Brothers, I don't think Netflix is going to be a company that people particularly talk about. As you noted, Jeremy, even the Narnia part of the conversation isn't really an exhibition conversation. It's an IMAX conversation. And I'm sure IMAX and its private events, because they've never really been very, let's say, visible at CinemaCon outside of, like, let's say, invite-only engagements, I'm sure they'll promote Narnia. But outside of that, I don't think it's going to be a big part of the discussion. Narnia is going to be a 2-week interlude on some IMAX screens before Dune takes them. That's what I think is going to happen. And that's going to be, I think, one of the takeaways from this year's event. Looking at other evolutions here, guys, I want to talk a little bit about the expansion of the Family Entertainment Center concept, or the Cinema Entertainment Center concept, because we've seen more and more chains adopt this outside of urban areas and more suburban and rural areas. We now have news that Cinemark is expanding its Gamescape concept to more cities. Now, this is a lot like what Cineplex in Canada does with the Rec Room, where it can have a movie theater attached, but it doesn't have to. Sometimes it's together, sometimes it's not. Rebecca, can you give us the latest sort of insights on what this expansion is from Cinemark? Because this marks the largest national chain to dip their toes into cinema entertainment centers that we have so far.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of the other larger chains, in the country, B&B Theaters, for example, really investing a lot in the family entertainment center space. And yeah, we are now seeing Cinemark, or rather we have been seeing Cinemark over the past year or so kind of soft launch the concept. They're not doing some big rollout, but they did just announce that they will be opening one of their entertainment centers in Corpus Christi, Texas. There's another one that's already open in Texas, I believe in El Paso. They have another in development. So it's kind of slowly evolving. The entertainment center parts, I believe, like are separate for the Corpus Christi one. It's a separate from the Cinemark location, but it's right next to the Cinemark location. So it's a little bit different from something that has everything all in one building, but it is, it's definitely more of a Cineplex Rec Room model.
It's a lot of land, it's a lot of labor to make it happen. And I don't think it's something that we can see on a national level. I agree with you, Rebecca. I think you're going to see a lot of opportunistic exhibitors look at specific sites and go with that. Don't count on one opening in the Northeast anytime soon. Jeremy, you're out there in Southern California. Can you see this happening at all in the state? Because the labor there is notoriously expensive, down to the point that I'm surprised there's as high a concentration of dine-in theaters in California left, because it's so expensive to operate them in that state.
I'm certainly not in LA County. And certainly, I don't know if it happens in San Diego County. I do think maybe it could happen in some areas like maybe like the San Bernardino, maybe in Ventura County, areas where you're not going to be having a lot of competition. And then you can have a place where, okay, this is where families can gather, areas, high income areas. I could possibly see that working. But yeah, out here, it's very rare to see a place like this. You'd have to look for a place where it's a place with a high concentration of families with high income and where there's not a lot of competition for other things to do. So immediately in Southern California, like that rules out huge swaths of the region.
You have to balance both things, right? I think it makes sense for certain markets, not for others. I'll say the same thing about the micro cinema concept, which is popping up slowly, but I think that's going to be something that you'll see a little bit more on urban areas. So things like the Metro Cinema here in New York, Tim League, the founder of Alamo Drafthouse, instituting a sort of private auditorium basis with on-demand first-run films and a 3-course catered meal in specifically small auditoriums, brings a whole like private screening room experience to folks in a city like New York City. Then you've got concepts like Monoplex out of Connecticut, which is originally a concept that started in South Korea to go into a hotel and these underutilized, let's say, conference room areas that are dormant in a lot of hotels nationwide and convert those into first-run movie theaters. I think those concepts are going to be springing up here and there in other locations. But in terms of cinema design and cinema innovations, those are the two big trends that I think are going to be part of the conversations this year. Because we always look at CinemaCon in terms of the new trailers and the new footage. We don't always give it attention in terms of what's happening in the trade show, what's happening in the innovations. It's not a coincidence that a lot of the trade show vendors that promoted premium large format products over the last 5 years now have a significantly larger footprint in the industry today. Exhibitors are going to that trade show and making strategic decisions on what the future of their buildings are going to be moving forward. I think those are the two big trends looking forward to this year. Now, the last topic that we have here for our list of items at CinemaCon 2026, Rebecca, is going to be new leadership among major circuits. We've got news that Ellis Jacob, the longtime CEO of Cineplex up in Canada, he's retiring later this year. He's receiving a special award, a commemoration at CinemaCon. And we've also got news that Marcus Theatres has announced a new president to step in for outgoing and retiring president Mark Grams.
Yeah, we'd heard that Mark Grams was going to be retiring shortly after CinemaCon back in the latter half of last year. Today, we did get the news that Jeffrey F. Tomachek is going to be the new president. He has been with Marcus for some decades, most recently as the CFO, which he was named in 2020. Definitely being a CFO starting in 2020, you definitely have some business savvy there. So yeah, Mark Grams is going to be retiring shortly after CinemaCon, May 1st of this year. Tomachek will take his place. So yeah, we are sort of seeing that shift. It kind of felt like there is a sense of we've reached a certain milestone in this industry where things maybe feel a little bit more stable, more secure than they have certainly in years, 2020, 21, 22. So we are seeing some of that shift take place on the C-suite level.
Yeah, new leadership coming into major circuits. Of course, we have not that long ago, Sean Gamble stepping up to the CEO role at Cinemark, stepping in for Mark Cerati. Sean Gamble having been the CFO for many years over at Cinemark. And of course, Eduardo Acuña, longtime veteran of the industry, going from Cinépolis to leading Regal as it emerged from bankruptcy. New batch of leaders here, but none of them new. Jeff Tomacek, new president at Marcus Theaters, has been in the industry and with Marcus for many, many years. So familiar faces as we write the next chapter of this industry. Before we go to our sponsor segment with Cube, Jeremy, are there any other questions that you have as a reporter going into CinemaCon 2026 that we haven't talked about?
Well, one thing I'm curious to see is how Amazon, not just for this CinemaCon, but going forward, how Amazon takes this momentum they have off of Project Hail Mary. They've proven that they can be what theaters need when it comes to delivering a big tentpole film, and they've got more stuff to come. They've got Verity, they've got the Thomas Crown Affair, which is now probably going to be a lot more higher profile now that Michael B. Jordan's won the Oscar. Like last year was about laying out the blueprint for being the replacement of 20th Century Fox, and now here they are providing their equivalent of The Martian. That was a Fox film, and now they've got their own version of The Martian contributing to theaters. Beyond that, I think what I'm going to be talking with a lot of people is just about preparing for a potential future in which you're going to have one less major studio out there. And there's not a single person I've met that's believed the whole 30 films a year thing. So it's just this feeling of that if this merger goes through, you're going to have fewer movies, at least from Hollywood. And how do you work around that? Do you start expanding your partnerships with the smaller players? Do you start looking for more self-distribution? Do you look for partnerships with local filmmakers and trying to get their stuff out there? There's no easy question for it, and there's no easy replacement for what Warner Brothers has brought to the market as its own studio. But the work has to start now. Nobody can wait for all the legal battles to come to resolve themselves. Everybody's got to be proactive here.
And that actually is something that I spoke about with Kristen and Rajesh over at Cube in the sponsor interview that you're going to be hearing shortly after this break. Just sort of the way evolution in technology, in the case of Cube, we're talking about digital delivery systems, the VPF going away, sort of leads to the ability to kind of piecemeal put together a more varied, a larger slate of films. Like you said, Jeremy, if we are going to be losing a major studio, we are going to have to try a lot of different things, work with a lot of different companies to see what works, because it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. It's definitely an interesting time in terms of the programming opportunities, because, there maybe is we've been struggling with there not being so much from the major studios, but we've really seen some other players really step to the forefront and help make some of these smaller releases really successful in their own markets.
Well, let's go into that interview after this commercial break and thank our colleague Jeremy Fuster from The Wrap for joining us. If you want to keep up with all of Jeremy's articles, you can read them every day over at thewrap.com. And I believe you guys also run a newsletter there that has a lot of those insights, correct?
Yeah, we have our Wrap Pro section where we're going to be talking a lot about CinemaCon this week. I have my box office coverage we put out every week. And also my colleague Lucas Manfredi has been covering the Warner Brothers Paramount situation from every single angle. He's put out a lot of great stuff, and I really recommend reading it. So, and we also have my colleague Humberto Gonzalez, a story about the downfall of J.J. Abrams' Bad Robot, which went from a $250 million production deal to now completely pulling up stakes and selling at Santa Monica offices. So we have a lot of great stuff to check out, and if you want to get a subscription, it'd be much appreciated.
You can find that over at thewrap.com. And now, after this commercial break, Rebecca's interview with Cube.
CubeWire is a self-service single-window system for global theatrical distribution. CubeWire's electronic delivery network now spans more than 1,000 theaters domestically and includes 15 of the largest theater chains in the US. With a simple but comprehensive user interface, distributors can manage their digital cinema assets, assign territorial rights for their content, and have their digital cinema packages and key delivery messages delivered to movie theaters across the world. Theaters can manage their own digital cinema device details and access their universal inbox on the CubeWire service as well. To learn more about CubeWire services, technology, and pricing, visit www.cubewire.com.
And I am joined today on the preview episode of our CinemaCon podcast series by Kristen Kilpinski, VP of Exhibitor Relations, and Rajesh Ramachandran, Chief Technology Officer at Cube Cinema. So I know everyone's looking forward to CinemaCon, a great opportunity to talk with all the vendors in this space and know about updates and technology innovations happening in the cinema industry. So Cube Cinema for decades have been a digital cinema technology provider for the cinema industry. Largely, I know in India, you gained a higher profile here in the domestic market in the last couple of years with the acquisitions of Arts Alliance Media in 2026 and then Metamedia in 2025. So for people who are maybe familiar with those companies but not so familiar with Cube's background, could you talk a little bit about what Cube Media is and how you operate?
Sure, Rebecca. So Cube Cinema, we just turned 40 at the start of the year, and we're actually celebrating that at CinemaCon. Because we started off as in India as a audio production services and commercial production services company, and then so we were big user of technology for production and post production, and along the way we saw that the industry at large needed a company to shepherd them through the major technology changes that were happening in that time. So that's kind of how we started getting into initially representing other technology manufacturers. For example, we brought non-linear editing to India with Avid. Then we did digital theater sound with DTS around the Jurassic Park time. So these were like the early forays that we had in the technology space, where we were representing technology. And then as digital cinema started gaining ground or becoming an idea in late 90s and early 2000s, we got into it building our own product line. So that's kept us busy for the last 26 years. So about 15 years of being technology users and then representing other technology manufacturers, and now the last 25 years of going out with our own pieces of technology. But our first digital cinema deployment was actually in the US and in Portugal. Yeah. So we actually did the first digital cinema rollout for Landmark theaters. Back in the day, we opened with this Steven Soderbergh movie called Bubble. This was all in 2005. So that's when we got started. And like I said, we got started here. We worked with the Ministry of Culture in Portugal. They were doing an on-demand digital cinema network. So we rolled that out in 2005. This was all happening now, 20 years ago. And then what happened in the US was that the digital, or rather the virtual print fee business model took over the equipment buying and financing decisions. So that was not something that we were very, let's say, clued into at that point of time. But what was also happening is that we got really busy with India, where we did all of those things, right? So if you look at the variety of things that we do in India, we are a combination of what used to be DCIP in the US, the integration company. We still are a cinema advertising company. We run a cinema advertising network. So much like NCM in the US, we are also a digital cinema mastering and company like Deluxe, for example. And of course, now we do delivery, where I think we have a name for ourselves with CubeWire, so we don't have to compare ourselves with others there. So that's kind of where we started and where we've been. And yes, now with the last couple of acquisitions, certainly our global exposure has really improved.
One of the subjects that's going to be spoken about a lot over CinemaCon Week is the need for a diversity of content. Rajesh, you mentioned virtual print fees, and now that those are gone, we're able to see cinemas experimenting a lot more with niche forms of programming, even with programming live events, a sporting event or a concert. That in particular is a growing, really exciting segment of the industry. So Cube Cinema, through the Cube Wire part of your wider business, deals in digital delivery of content to cinemas. How has the technical side of that conversation evolved over the last year? How has the technical infrastructure improved so that cinemas are able to screen some of these some of this content to a level of quality that moviegoers have come to expect from them?
Well, number one, technology. I feel like 5G has changed the game. I think 5 years ago, people weren't willing to consider 5G as an option. And now we've proven that it is an option. And, I think we'll talk about it later, but you touched on live. That is definitely something that moving forward, we're figuring out a solution for, and we're very focused on that. And, I think you'll see very exciting things come out of us in that development. But I think technology really is the major driving force behind us being able to expand so quickly. That, and, I think theaters specifically have been given more ability, I guess, to be able to do self-installs, right? So technology has kind of shifted the way we think about technology also, and the way that theaters can move quickly with 5G as a solution also. I mean, we spent a lot of time last year just even making the packaging and the shipping and the equipment and the instructions and all those things very easy for theaters to be able to self-install. And I think that has really helped us be able to expand quickly.
It's great that you have that increased ease of use on the consumers, on the cinema side. But at the same time, if you're doing something that you've never really done before, if you're not super familiar with it, maybe if you're an independent cinema or something smaller, you want to really be sure you have trusted partners.
Totally. And we do have 24/7 support, right? And a whole support deployment team that everyone has access to when they're doing the deployments and the installs. But it's not like a satellite that you have to put up on the roof, right? It's a much smaller device that's much easier to install.
We have now changed that to a model where we would call a theater and tell them that, it looks like you're getting a lot of content from us. We're going to send you a box, and that's all you need. So we actually send them a 5G modem and our wiretap appliance, which is a small computer that actually downloads the DCPs. We just send it to them, and in most of the places they actually do a self-install, and we can support them over the phone. So we took a business that used to be site surveys and roof rights and big
Having to
installation
deal with
schedules.
the last mile problem of getting it.
Exactly. Dealing with the last mile problem for months at a time, to now this being just a matter of days between us talking to them and them going live. So I think the largest delay is the shipping delay of the box getting to them, right?
One of the things that Cube Cinemas in general does so well is solving problems, identifying problems in the marketplace that need to be solved. And I think that since my time here, I've watched the progress and the innovation grow, and it's always exhibitor, very exhibitor focused. How do we find solutions? So this live business, that we have another entity that we're looking at also, but it's solving problems for the industry in general. I think identifying and then finding a solution. And, we have a whole programming team and development teams that allow us to work more quickly internally also than what has happened in the past. I would like to mention that we aren't charging delivery fees. So like where exhibitors are still being charged those fee for, not a virtual print fee, but a print fee, like they're still getting charged for deliveries where, we're not returning platters anymore. So we came in at a time where we don't have that infrastructure to be charging from. So we don't have those charges. So barrier to entry with cost, we're saving people money. The equipment is free for theaters, right? So it's really an exciting time, I think, for a change in how things have been working.
And how does that extensive 40-year global experience Cube has in a wide variety of different countries, how does that add to or improve your ability to solve some of these problems as they arise?
What we have learned over the years doing this, Rebecca, is that if we can make something work for India, for Indian content, it usually ports very well for the rest of the world because we work with very tight constraints. One thing that the Indian film industry is trained as well is how to deal with last minute work, last minute deliveries, right? And Indian film industry is by definition a very last minute. Even as a culture, we thrive on that, right?
New product every week.
Yes, and what that means is that we still cannot compromise on quality or security or the overall reliability that we bring to this, nor can we charge a premium for last minute, right? So while we would call it last minute, that's just normal delivery for the Indian film industry, right? And that's trained us into creating workflows and training our colleagues to be extremely nimble. And it's not like we get into any kind of a regular drill week on week, right? Every week is a different challenge for us, and we go at it from this problem solving mentality that Kristen spoke about. So that training ground that India has provided us has made us very well suited for. So even in a market like the US, where things are a bit well planned and things happen earlier than most parts of the world, now they are actually turning around and telling us that, but you guys can actually do this in a couple of days, what takes 2 weeks for others. So could we use that extra time? And if that's going to make their product better, or if that's going to provide them with more flexibility, so be it.
How does AI play into that? Because obviously it's something that is transforming industries all around the world. It's right now it's in sort of I think a nebulous place where people aren't really sure how it's going to end up. Just in terms of all of these different providers floating around, how does AI? How do you think it's going to play into the future of cinema, operationally speaking?
I think, as with any big technological shift, there's a lot of hype and, of course, fear, uncertainty, and doubt around something like this. So, as you can imagine, like all companies, we are using a lot of AI in how we run our business, how we build products, how we design products, and so on. So we are using them ourselves to. That is also giving us an idea of where things really stand, and being able to separate the hype from the reality. Now, when we apply those learnings to the cinema business, we see that cinemas generate a lot of data. The business as itself generates a lot of data. Movie files are large, but that's just the tip of the iceberg, right? Just in terms of the show operations and the number of devices that are there in the cinema, and each one actually giving us some data in terms of their performance, their lifetimes. So we've been sitting on a mountain of data, not really using them for very obvious, mundane type analytics, right? So AI certainly holds a lot of promise in changing that. Where we are also seeing a lot more applications is actually when it comes down to film programming, right? So that seems to be some form of there's a mystique around how some exhibitors do it better than others. Those are certainly areas where AI can help a lot in terms of being able to correlate between content type, the season of it, the genre, and all the content attributes, and then tying it to how they actually performed at that particular theater by looking at the tickets sold, and for a certain type of content, what's the best day in the week or best time in the weekend to place that show for maximum attendance, and that combination is something that we don't see happening yet.
How much technical knowledge, I guess, what's the learning curve on exhibitors with working for CubeWire? Can you talk a little bit about that process?
The nice thing about us too is that we work with all theaters, right? So the communications that we've sent to all theaters, and all theaters can join the network. It doesn't matter where you are, or we have different ISP providers. We work to find a solution with everyone. So I think that a lot of people, I guess I would also say, like, just technology in general has been kind of a barrier to entry in this in this genre or in this content delivery ecosystem, because I think a lot of theaters have been promised things that we weren't delivering on or that weren't delivered, right? And, I would point out that because we don't have the same kind of infrastructure cost, we have the ability to scale rapidly, right? And we have the teams internally to do so. Like I said, we have a whole team that's 24/7 that's dedicated to customer support, both on deployment and DCP delivery. Then we have a team that's only focused on deployment, right? So our customer service, I feel like, is really high also.
You're able to work out those knots as they happen and not charge extra for having done so.
And deliver what we say we're going to deliver, right? And I think that in the technology space, I think exhibitors are cautious about saying and delivering, right? So I think the fact that we have expanded so rapidly only proves that we are committed to the deployment, right? And to being a partner, a true partner for theaters.
Kristen and Rajesh, it's been great speaking with you today. I look forward to seeing you both at CinemaCon. For any of our listeners who want to find out more information about Cube Cinema and its various technological offerings, you can email 40years, 40years, at cubecinema.com.
Irwin Seating has been building and installing seating solutions in schools, stadiums, concert halls, and cinemas for 119 years. So it's safe to assume they've seen a thing or two. And safer still to assume that Irwin not only has the products you need, they have the experience, knowledge, and know-how to solve whatever problem you have that needs solving, regardless of the size of your cinema or your problem. To learn more about what Irwin has learned about cinema in the last 119 years, visit irwinseating.com.
And we are back here on the Box Office Podcast with the Cinema United President and CEO, Michael O'Leary. Welcome back, Michael. Always great to chat on the eve of this big event. This conversation is pre-recorded before we all show up to Vegas. Welcome to New York City. Unfortunately, the weather didn't make a nice change for you this time around.
Well, it's always great to see you, Daniel, and it's always great to be in New York, so I couldn't be happier.
Well, let's talk about everything in this industry because it's going to be a big year in 2026. We came out of CinemaCon last year with a very clear message from all your members. It's something that you brought up in your State of the Industry. The importance of a 45-day minimum exclusivity window. This year, we're coming into CinemaCon with maybe the biggest studio to have yet make that commitment, openly stating through a story in the New York Times, we're moving there. We're going to start expanding that theatrical window in 2026 and then moving to a 7-week minimum window starting in 2027. What's the process of this conversation so far?
Well, I think obviously this is welcome news from Universal. We've had a number of conversations with them going back over what we view as the importance of theatrical exclusivity, and I think they deserve full credit for the decision to do this. Obviously, they're making decisions that are, as they should, in the best interest of their organization. They have the information. I suspect that they looked at the data and came to the conclusion that this is the best way to maximize the financial return on investment that they can get from the movies they make. So we see this as a very positive step. There's been other things in the marketplace recently. Tom Rothman speaking very candidly about the need to fix windows. Of course, Disney continues to have the longest theatrical window. And so, I've had other conversations with other studios. I think this is a very positive step, and I think we're hopefully building some momentum to a place where it just becomes standard that the window is at least 45 days.
And the door is open. I've said it on this podcast before. We had the CEO of Netflix for the first 2 months of the year going around telling everybody on how important a 45-day minimum window is. I assume the door is open to Netflix. When they want to make that change, we're ready to welcome them.
I think that we've been fairly consistent for certainly the time that I've been at Cinema United, that our door is open to anyone who wants to engage in the theatrical experience in a meaningful way. And even in the context of the recent effort by Netflix to acquire Warner Brothers, those conversations with Netflix were ongoing. we never reached a level of detail where they would commit to the type of things that I think we would want to see. But I do think there was a recognition there that if you do this in the right way and you support the theatrical experience, it can be a positive for everybody. So our door is always open. All we ask is that you treat theatrical in a meaningful way and come prepared to commit to it in terms of windows and marketing and the support that a movie needs to be successful.
And it's an example of what that unified voice in this industry can bring. We had that unified voice around a 45-day window at CinemaCon last year. And we are talking at the 1-year anniversary of the NATO rebrand to Cinema United. And that seems to be a big core theme of your tenure as the head of the trade association, representing exhibitors, unifying under one voice and making sure that our priorities are heard. Can you talk about that importance of cinemas coming together in this day and age?
Yeah, in simplest terms, we are more effective when we're united. It's very easy for critics and people that have different agendas to try and to divide us. And I think it's important for people to understand that being united doesn't mean that you lose your sense of the individual characteristics that make you special. You know, there's a place under our tent for independence, for the big circuits, and for everything in between, art house, drive-in, you know, the food and beverage community. But I just believe fundamentally that we are more effective when we talk with the singular voice. We are different, but we're united behind our support for the theatrical experience. And so one of the things that I think that we're not just trying to do at CinemaCon, although that's going to be a part of it, but to do it 52 weeks out of the year, is convey support and talk about all of the different aspects of our industry. Whether it's studios or the guilds or even the media, frankly, understands that we are united behind a common position. It has that much more impact. And I think it's really important. You know, the consolidation situation that we're currently in is a prime example. Mm-hmm. You know, we've been consistent about our concerns about that from the beginning. We haven't wavered from those. And everybody across the industry has been behind that. And I think it's allowed us to be more effective and raise a lot of issues which frankly weren't going to otherwise get attention. And you mentioned earlier that you had Netflix talking repeatedly about a 45-day window. That doesn't happen unless exhibition is united and disciplined and making the point that that is a critical issue for our industry. So that's just one example of how staying unified inures to the benefit of the entire industry.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about that potential merger. And I do say potential because there are so many things up in the air. This is the world's longest M&A soap opera for our industry. We saw the effects of what happens when two major studios become one. 2016, the last year that Fox and Disney operate independently, they combined for something like 38 titles. Last year, Fox and Disney under one roof, it's half that number of new titles coming to our cinemas. 1 + 1 doesn't add up to 2 in these cases. We're lucky if it ends up at 0.5. So let's talk about this concern right now of Paramount and Warner Brothers potentially becoming one. What are the potential impacts to exhibitors, and what are your members' biggest concerns about this deal moving forward?
So I think, you know, we've been trying to be very disciplined and consistent about our concerns from the beginning. And so these were even applicable when Netflix was the primary bidder, but they're certainly still applicable with Paramount. And they basically fall into 4 categories. One is, as you alluded to, the drop in production. It's not just the number of movies that went away, it's the types of movies that went away. And it took about $1 billion out of the box office. Imagine if we had even half of that back. And you and I were sitting here today talking about where the box office is. It's a much different conversation than the one we're currently having. So that's the first thing. The second thing is just leverage and power in the market. You know, there used to be 6 major studios. You go from 6 to 5, the 5 have more power than the 6. You go from 5 to 4, the 4 have more power than the 5 or the 6. So we continue to talk with regulators, legislators, policymakers, the media about the inequities in power across this industry. Related to that is the third point I'd make, is that costs are going to go up. Mm-hmm. There's no evidence that you have mergers of this scale where prices go down. Right. And that's not just bad for theatrical, that's bad for the whole industry. Those costs have to be passed on somewhere. And so it's going to hurt consumers, it's going to hurt vendors, it's going to hurt the creative community that wants projects to work on. So that's the third element. And the fourth element is one which isn't getting much attention, but is really, really important. And that is that at its core, whether it was Netflix or Paramount, this transaction is largely about the catalog. and using that catalog to grow the algorithm and support and bolster their streaming service. There's nothing on its face untoward about that. But if we lose access to those catalogs, which so many of our members, particularly some of the art house and smaller theaters, the independent theaters, rely on to fill gaps in the calendar, they just lock those down. That's another loss in the marketplace beyond just the simple drop in production. So we've been very clear with people about that. We've been having conversations with Paramount about it. Obviously, they feel like they are going to come in and be very pro-theatrical. But, we have to see more than just kind of what people are saying.
Right.
Daniel, that 3 years ago, David Zaslav came to CinemaCon and spoke very passionately about the importance of theatrical. And he said that Warner Brothers would make 20 movies a year and they would support them with marketing and vibrant windows. And they would not just have a strong team, they would grow their team. And of those 4 things, none of those actually ever came to pass.
I was about to say, we had a great slate last year from Warner's. I think it was 9 new titles. Yeah. Not even half that number from 4 years ago.
So it's very hard to pay your rent or your mortgage or your employees with promises. And so our view is that we need to try and find ways to get greater, first of all, clarity on what it is that the purchasers expect to do, and assurances that there will be some type of follow through that they'll actually do them.
Now, you mentioned CinemaCon a second ago, and we are talking on the eve of the event launching in Vegas this year. You guys have retooled how that event is going to go through some of the main benchmarks of each day. Can you talk to me about what are those big changes of CinemaCon 2026?
Yeah, I think CinemaCon is obviously an amazing week. It's something that we spend the other 51 weeks of the year planning for. And what we really want is it to be a very special week for everybody who participates, but obviously the theater owners that come from all over the country and around the world. And so we're constantly looking at it from how do you evolve the show? How do you grow the show? How do you provide more value in different ways to the people who come and spend their hard-earned time and money with us in Vegas? And so, it's hard because it's a 4-day event. I know that 4 days in Vegas can feel longer than 4 days, but we are constrained somewhat by the calendar. And so what we did was we looked at where are the opportunities to create space and to provide additional types of programming for people, in some cases just to give them an hour back of their own time to catch their breath. But we feel like we've really we're striking a very good balance here. One of the things we're going to do is the iTalk meeting, which is incredibly important, is going to kick off the show on Sunday. So we move that out of Monday to Sunday. That'll be in the afternoon on Sunday. And then on, Monday, there used to be the International Day, and we're not doing International Day. But what we're trying to do there is integrate the international community more holistically throughout the whole week.
Back to the Cinema United point. It's not just international and domestic. This is a multinational industry, a global industry. Right. The same concerns on an international level are the ones that apply to hometown America.
Right. And one of the things you're going to see, I think, which is going to be particularly helpful and instructive for members, is on Monday, we're doing multiple tiers of educational programming. Mm-hmm. And there is so much great innovation and wonderful work being done in Europe that we're going to have a lot of those voices on the panel. And we're in a consumer-facing industry, and it doesn't really matter where your consumers are coming from. They want great experiences. And I think there are going to be pieces of those conversations that the domestic theater owners can take back to their communities and maybe tweak them a little bit or maybe adopt them full scale. And it's going to allow them to have a better experience there. So, we're very excited about that. We're going to also, a very special thing, which I do want to mention, we're going to honor Ellis Jacob, who's leaving Cineplex this year with the Legend of Cinema Award. He has been a tireless supporter of Cinema United and of the exhibition industry in general. And so we're very excited to be able to take a few moments and just recognize him. He'll be only the second person to win this award, the other being Martin Scorsese. So that's a pretty good class to be in, I think. So Ellis is excited, and we're happy to be able to recognize him.
Ellis told us that anecdote, by the way, when we talked to him a couple of weeks ago, how you called him up. You're like, hey, you're getting this award. He asked, well, who else has won this, Michael? They're like, yeah, it's Scorsese. And then he was like, okay, I'm more than convinced.
Yes.
That sounds like a good deal.
That was the deal clincher right there.
Well, we've been talking about United Industry, about some of the talking points you're going to be bringing into CinemaCon this year. We've heard things in prior years like the importance of an exclusivity window, an importance of more films hitting our theaters. We've heard highlights of the billions of dollars that are being reinvested into circuits as we speak. This isn't a one-year deal. It's an ongoing process. This year, can you preview what some of those big conversations are going to be in the halls of Caesar's Palace?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think our focus, in addition to uniting the industry, is always on the future. And so we try to acknowledge the past, which we're very proud of, learn from the past, both good and bad, whatever we can, but we're always looking towards the future. And it's important that we look not just at the ground, right, at our feet, but we look to the horizon. And certainly coming out of the pandemic and then the strikes which followed that, there was a lot of turbulence in the system. Mm-hmm. But I fundamentally believe that this exhibition industry, still has an opportunity to author its own future. But we have to be willing to do that. And so what does that look like? What are the things that we need to do, not just to survive, but to thrive in the future? So a lot of the programming we're going to be doing is about practical things that people can do to strengthen their operations. Obviously, our discussions with the studios are very important, and we started that last year, and we'll continue to talk about that this year. And I think that that's really, it's a theme which should resonate with every member, because, we want to build theatrical exhibition for generations to come, not just for the next 2 or 3 years. And so we've really tried to get out of the weekend by weekend, month by month, year by year kind of horse race way of looking at the industry. And my hope is that on Thursday or Friday, whenever folks go home and they're on the plane or in their car, they're thinking about and feeling good about their future. And they feel like, this industry is vibrant, this industry is strong. I learned some things this week that I can put into place in my theater. I contributed this week to some things that people could do. That's really what this is about, to come out of it with some momentum, head into the summer and see where things are. I think we have an opportunity here. We've got a good slate in 2026. And I think we have to keep building momentum. From our view as an organization, this isn't something that's going to happen overnight. It has to be a sustained, disciplined effort over an extended period of time. And then at some point we'll look up and go, we're in a pretty good place. So that's the goal.
It really feels like it's around the corner. And that's why I do like to close our annual interview with the hardest question each year. Does Cadillac get its first podium before or after we hit 10 billion domestically?
After.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like that answer, actually. I'm a Checo guy, but I'll take that answer.
It's after. I'm confident about that. That might be my most confident answer in this discussion.
Well, Michael, thank you so much for joining us here on the Box Office Podcast.
Thank you.